everyone, and welcome to the final installment of Progress Vlogmas. In this video I picked up right where I left off in the last one and continued working on my Christmas costume. I also made some more progress on the hat that I mentioned in last week's video. I also finally resumed progress on the 1880s evening gown, planned and shopped for a bunch of projects for the new year, and started on 2 new things at the very end of this video. All in all, it was a really productive 2 weeks, even though there was still a bit more procrastinating than I would have liked. I've already edited this video and I know it's really long, so I'm just going to get right into the footage, and I hope you enjoy! Hello everyone! So I'm off to a late start today. This is the Christmas project and I'm hoping to get it finished today, and there's a lot left to do. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that I can get it all done on time and be able to photograph it tomorrow. And I will try and update you throughout the day, but my focus is getting this finished, so I may neglect to film as much as I would usually. My first task is taking it in, because I tried it on yesterday and it wasn't as fitted in the waist as I would like it to be. So I think I'm going to put a dart right here and right here, since that's the only point that doesn't have boning. Ideally I would take it at the side seams, but there's boning sewn into the side seams, so I can't. And after I do that, I'm going to sew on the sleeves, which I showed in the last video, and then do up the back seam, and finally get to work on the hem. And yeah, I'm just hoping I can do it all and manage to make something really pretty before the day is over. I actually don't even have until the day ends. Since I'm filming this project, I have until 1 o'clock when the lighting starts getting really bad and I can no longer film. So it's a tight schedule, but I'm going to do my best. The sleeves are sewn on, so now it's time to do up the back seam, which is really exciting. I also have to figure out whether or not I want to close up the side seams completely. They were cut on an angle, so they drape nicely, but that means the bottom half of the seam isn't really sewn. So I don't know if I want to wear an underskirt with this or if I want to sew up that side seam, or if doing that will ruin the drape. So I'm going to have to play around with pins and try the dress on once the back seam is done up and see what I think. And then I can hem it and then the dress will be done. So I just tried it on and the news isn't great. It fits really nicely in the bust and the waist, and I really like the silhouette it gives. Everything is covered properly because it fits the bust really nicely, but this point is flaring out when it's worn. It's drooping down because of the weight of the sleeves. So what I should have done is I should have had a boning support made out of metal going up through here instead of using plastic, because plastic is a lot more prone to bending than metal is. And I'm actually having the same problem in the back, and it's almost more troublesome in the back because that's something I can't see when I'm wearing the costume, so I won't be able to correct it on my own. So I think what I have to do is add straps, and I'm going to use this thin elastic. I also tested out pinning the side seams all the way down, and I liked how it looked, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to hem the dress. Hello everyone! So yesterday was crazy, and it was so crazy that I didn't end up filming very much because I was so focused on getting my Christmas costume done and getting everything to do with that costume completely finished and prepared so I could photograph it today. And I did manage to do that. It looked beautiful in the photos, and I'm really happy with the photos so far, so I'm very glad that I got it done on time. And though I don't love the construction of that project, I'm happy with how it turned out considering the issues I had with it and inspiration for it. I'll talk more about the construction process for it tomorrow, because to be honest, I'm still kind of exhausted from yesterday and from getting up at 6 in the morning to get ready to take photos today. And I just don't even want to think about it anymore today. And in the meantime, I'm going to decorate my tree. Look at it! I had to do some crazy rearranging to get it to fit, but I did find a spot for it. It's a 4-foot pre-lit something that I got from Michael's, and it was on sale for $20, which I think is a pretty fantastic deal. Though we have a big tree downstairs, I spend a lot of time up here, so I don't actually get to see it that often. So it'll be nice having one in my sewing room that I can look at. I bought all these ornaments! I think they all ended up being 70% off, and I spent about $30. And I'm going to attach hooks to these and then start putting them on. Here it is! I used all but 8 ornaments, so I'm very happy with the number I got, and I think it looks really pretty. I love it. It's so sparkly and pretty, and it just makes me smile, and I'm excited that I get to look at it pretty much every day for the next 3 weeks. So this has kind of been a highlight of my day, though I am excited to have photos of my Christmas costume too. And I'm probably going to spend the rest of the day editing and being lazy. Hello everyone, so today is a planning day. There will probably be some sewing involved too, but I'm primarily planning the projects that I'm going to buy fabric for in the garment district. My approach to shopping in the garment district is usually having a very detailed list. The first step for creating a list for me is having a sticky note or some scrap of paper that I mark ideas down on for the month or 2 months before I know I'm going in. And I just started doodling things down whenever I came up with something that I thought would be fun to make. So then I transfer that into a proper list, and then I go ahead and research those projects further. Some of these I have a good idea of just based off my general historical fashion knowledge, but others I haven't thought too much about. So I'm going to do a little bit more research and probably a bit more sketching and try and figure out which one of these I'm most excited about making and think I would enjoy the process of making the most. So it's later in the day now, and I've done a bit more research on all the projects, and as per usual when I'm doing that research, it becomes quite clear to me which projects I'm most enthusiastic about and want to move forward with. So then the costumes that I do want to make get transferred over to a confirmed list, and for these projects I research them further and I tend to draw sketches for them, and I also come up with rough material estimates for each one, as well as how many yards of fabric I believe I will need to make them. Then depending on how much the confirmed projects will take to make, I may be able to add another to my list or I may have to remove one. Now that all of this is done, I'm going to go ahead and create the master list, which is basically where I write out all the different materials I need for each project, and I'm also going to pick a single reference photo that represents each project, and then I will bring that with me on my phone if I'm having trouble visualizing in store what I'm trying to make. Usually that doesn't happen, but it's a very chaotic experience sometimes, so it's nice to have that reference on hand. So after all that, here's my list, and I'm going to put the photos of each project on my phone, and that's it. The planning is done. So I'm very excited about this, and I'm very excited to go into New York City, but I'm going to try and put that excitement on hold because I have a bunch of other stuff I need to focus on today. So yesterday ended up being an editing day, mostly because I've been procrastinating so much on the 1880s project. I just can't bring myself to work on it, but today I'm going to try and force myself to because I've invested so much time into it already, and I feel like if I ignore it for any longer, I'm not going to finish it. And I don't want to do that because then I will have wasted so many hours of work. So that's what's on the agenda for today. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about the Christmas project. I honestly can't remember where I last left off, but after sewing the eyelets in and doing up the back seam, I added a modesty panel. And then after fitting, I realized it was flaring away from the shoulder right here. So unfortunately I had to add straps, and I originally used elastic for the straps, and then as I was trying the bodice on, after sewing on the elastic, I remembered I have this decorative ribbon, which is velvet ribbon with silver flecks down the center, and it matches this project perfectly. So I ended up ripping the elastic off and using this instead, and I'm very happy with how it turned out and how it looks. The final touch were a few of those velvet poinsettias, which I really like. I was a little worried they would take away from the simplicity of the dress, but I think they add a lot to it, so I'm happy I decided to add them. My one regret is this little piece of pine because it stabbed me in the armpit the entire time we were photographing this project, and it was awful. But other than that, I really like this and I like how it turned out. So on that note, it's time to work on the 1880s project and figure out how the hell I'm going to create the shape the skirt needs. So wish me luck on that one. Please ignore my messy sewing room, but I've been working on this project for all of half an hour, and it's already looking way better than I was expecting and came together really super quickly. So this just goes to show that you shouldn't procrastinate because what you're procrastinating on is likely going to be easier than you expect, and even if it isn't, procrastinating isn't going to make it any easier to accomplish. So once again, I feel a little bit silly for putting this off so much because it already looks pretty great. So I'm happy that it looks great, but man, I wish I had gotten to this point a week ago. What I did is I cut out a piece of taffeta that was 90-ish inches long, and then I gathered the top edge and I gathered a portion that was 20 inches down from the center back and 23 inches down from each side, so it's gathered on a slope, which gives it that draped effect. Now I have to cut the hemline. It should sit level with the ground and then have a large fan-shaped train, and I think to accomplish that train I may have to add a gaudet of fabric in the center, but I don't know if I can accomplish that without it looking kind of bad. So I'm going to play around a little bit with the fabric and figure it out. But I slashed the train of the dress down the center, and then I inserted a gaudet, which caused there to be less bunching on the sides of the skirt since there's now more volume in the back. And I really like how it looks. I think it's a lot closer to the silhouette of the dress I'm basing this off of, and just a lot nicer in general. I've cut one side of the train down, and now I have to take it off my dress form and use this side as a guide for cutting that side, and then I can hem it and start trying to figure out how many ruffles I'm going to add to this. So I got the hem cut and then hemmed. I did it by machine and turned the bottom edge inward by a 1/2 inch twice. It's a little pointier than I wanted it to be, but that's okay. I can either cut that part off and then re-hem it, because the hem doesn't have to be pretty since there are going to be ruffles covering it, or I can just make it so the ruffles attach in a more natural curve and you won't even be able to tell. Speaking of ruffles, I figured out what ruffle pattern I'm going to use. There are going to be 4 tiers of ruffles, one made out of chiffon that's gathered down the center, one made out of this lace, another one made out of chiffon, and one made out of taffeta. And I got all of these cut out, and I got 2 of them finished. Here's the taffeta ruffle, and here's the chiffon ruffle that's gathered down the center. I did this by machine, and the gathering's going to be covered with some lace trim. Now, I'm getting really frustrated with these fabrics. As you can see, they fray a lot and really obnoxiously. And just for the sake of speed, and since this fabric is quite hard to cut, I've been tearing it to get the strips rather than using pinking shears, which only intensifies the stringy pieces. And the taffeta creates something similar that's really staticky and gets stuck to me. And I'm just not in the best mood, and I feel like I'm going to cut corners if I keep working on this since I'm frustrated. So I'm going to go downstairs and do some editing and then potentially come back to this later today. However, even if I don't, I'm feeling so much better about this project. I still don't have the pannier portions figured out, but I really like the silhouette so far, and I had enough fabric to cut out the ruffles, and I'm just feeling way more positive and like I can actually finish this. And hello everyone! So I'm back from the Garment District shopping trip, and I'm a bit embarrassed to report that I didn't film anything. I think I filmed like 15 seconds of footage while I was in. It was terrible. And I do have good excuses. They don't really matter, but I do have excuses. The shop I usually go into and get most of my material at has closed down, which is really sad. So I had to go to a lot of shops that I'm not as familiar with and wasn't as comfortable filming in. So it just didn't really end up happening. But I can show you the swatches. These are, I'd say, more than half, but not all the materials I got in the Garment District. These are just the ones I took swatches of. I got everything I need for a mid-19th century Russian court gown, which is really exciting. Those are the materials on the left. I got some fabric for a late 19th century seaside ensemble, which is that striped silk and cotton sateen in the corner. I also got stuff for a medieval costume, both a kirtle and a surcoat, which are those top fabrics. I got some stuff for an 1830s evening gown and a 1630s evening gown, and I'm just really excited. As I said, I did get some other things too, specifically a striped fabric for an 1880s bustle dress, and a few smaller cuts of fabric so I can make a Renaissance costume or something. So it was definitely a very successful trip, and I'm sorry I didn't document more of it, but hopefully all the progress I'm planning on making this week will make up for it. So in my last progress log, I said I was making a hat, and I've kind of finished the base of that hat. So it's all sewn together, and it's all covered with wool, and it's lined with cotton. To be honest, it looks terrible when it's on. The brim is like comically large for the size of the top, and I think the top is still too big, and it just looks really awful. But I've already invested so much time into it and wasted quite a bit of material on it, so I really want it to work out, and I'm going to try and save it with some trim. So I'm going to add a sash around the base, and I think I'm going to use some blue silk chiffon and then make a bow for it, and hopefully that will help make the brim look like it's in better proportion to the top portion. And then I'm going to add a bunch of feathers and just hope for the best. So I'll keep you posted on this and wish me luck, because right now I'm not feeling too confident. So I just added a chiffon sash and a bow, and I actually left the edges of the bow raw. I just pinked them so they won't fray very much, and I kind of like it. It's a little bit shabby looking, and it definitely helps balance out the size of the brim. Now I'm going to pile it with some of these feathers, and hopefully I will be very happy with the end result. So I added a bunch of feathers to it, and it's way better than it was. I'm still not completely happy with it. It's really a lesson that you'd think I would have learned after making my Turk, that you should take more time to draft the patterns and to test them before wasting a lot of time constructing something and ending up being unhappy with the end result. Yeah, you'd really think I would know that by now, but I always get so excited about a project and wrapped up in making it that I forget to really test things and make sure the pattern's good before I get started. So, sort of a bummer, but I do think with the right costume and hairstyle it would look really cute. So, it's not a total fail, it's just not my favorite hat I've ever made. And now it's time to work on the 1880s project. I want to try and get all the ruffles finished for it today and get the edges of the train turned inward so that I can start sewing the ruffles on tomorrow. So I finished turning the edges of the train inward. I just turned them inward and sewed them down by hand with whip stitches. Now I have to iron this edge so it looks a little bit sharper. And I also finished all the ruffles. So I have this appealing pile of ruffles over here, and after ironing the skirt I can start sewing them on, which is really exciting. And I think the shape of it is really going to start to come together, which will be cool. So I got one ruffle sewn on, and it's the widest ruffle, and it's made from satin-faced chiffon. And I actually hemmed this ruffle by machine just because the satin-faced chiffon is so difficult to manipulate by hand, and I think hemming it by machine actually gave me a cleaner, sharper looking result than it would have if I'd done it by hand, even though the stitching would have been less noticeable if I hemmed it by hand. So, on that note, now that I said okay to visible top stitching on these ruffles, I went ahead and hemmed and regathered the taffeta ruffle that's going to go over top of it because the hem on it looked really sloppy. I didn't iron it before I sewed it and it just looked bad. So I redid that and I'm much happier with it. And now I'm not as happy with this one. As you can see, it's very loose looking. And that's because I didn't iron or pin it before I did it. And I also didn't machine stitch the edges, so the edges are just folded. And I don't like it at all. So I think I'm going to rip out the center stitching on this one and then top stitch the edges and then regather it. And hopefully I will end up with something I'm a lot happier with. And then I can move forward with sewing the ruffles on and finishing the top edges of all of them. I've made progress, but I think I've also set myself back by a good half hour since I've decided to redo some of the ruffles. Well, that went pretty terribly. I ended up sewing as close to the edge as I could on one side, and I didn't like how that looked, so then on the other side I sewed a 1/4 inch away from the edge, which looks silly on its own because then the sides aren't even. But on top of that, I forgot that the top thread was different than the bottom thread, since 95% of the time I thread my machine so they're the same. And the way I sewed it, one side has the bobbin thread visible and the other side has the top thread visible, and the top thread was white. So it's way more obvious on this fabric, and it just looks awful. Like, I can't really redo it at this point. The fabric is quite delicate, so ripping out the center point, regathering it is one thing, but ripping out stitching so close to the edge is another. But I'm really, really disappointed and not very happy with the quality of work on this piece. I'm kind of comforting myself by saying this is the first time I've entered into this period, so things aren't going to be perfect just because I'm not that familiar with the silhouette and what goes into creating it. But at the same time, I really want this to turn out nicely since I'm so happy with the bodice and the front panel of the skirt, and it's just really pretty disappointing. So this is what I'm currently working with. I got the taffeta ruffle pinned on, and now I'm going to take a lunch break. When I come back, I'm going to sew it on, and then I'm going to cover those top edges with some lace tape, just because I don't want them to fray all over the place. Both satin-faced chiffon and taffeta are really prone to fraying, and they fray in these long streaks, which are really annoying and staticky and cling to everything. So I definitely want to prevent that from happening. Then I'm going to sew on some lace trim, and I'm going to sew 2 pieces on 4 inches apart, and then I'm going to sew this in between them so the lace ruffle will bracket either side of it, which I think will look really nice. It's funny, when I bought this lace I said that it was really cheap looking and scratchy and I didn't like it. I was just going to use it for petticoats so it would be hidden, but it's really grown on me. I love the amount of texture it has, and I think it's really pretty, and I think it works perfectly on this costume. So I think I bought 20 yards of it, and I kind of wish I'd bought more and purchased it in different colors because I'm digging it. And on that note, I'm going to get some lunch, and then I will return and hopefully make some more progress. Oh my god, that was torturous. My sewing machine is not behaving. It kept skipping stitches, and not just a couple stitches here and there, like inches of stitching. And it would behave totally perfectly on my testers, but as soon as I tried to sew on the lace, it would go crazy. And I think I must have redone parts of it about 8 times. I'm going to try changing the needle, which usually helps, but if it's behaving perfectly fine on samplers, I don't think that will necessarily make a difference. But that was annoying. At least it's done now, and I think it looks really cute. I'm going to mark a line 3 inches away from the top of this lace, and then I'm going to sew another lace ruffle down, and then I'm going to sew the satin-faced chiffon ruffle in between them, like I said earlier. I'm going to raid my lace collection. Hopefully I have a piece of trim I can use to cover this stitching. I don't know if I have 4 yards of lace trim that isn't meant to be sewn onto the edge of something, because I want it to be symmetrical, almost like ribbon. But I'll take a look and hopefully I can find something. The ruffles have intensified! Here's what I'm working with now. All of the ruffles are either sewn or pinned on, and I think it looks pretty great. It's not quite like I'd imagined, but I really love all the texture it has and the volume, and it lays out pretty nicely. So I'm honestly very happy with this and excited to move forward with it. I still have to drape the pannier things that will sit over the hips, and then I have to sew lace trim onto the edge of that, as well as the edge of this. I have some lace appliques left over from the fabric I purchased for the bodice, and I'm going to sew those around to the edges so they'll just sort of hang and add a bit of sparkle and detail. And I also have to sew this ruffle on. The lace ruffles and the longer ruffles are sewn on, but that center one isn't. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'm going to come back to this. I found one that I think will look quite cute, so I'm going to sew this on by hand, or at least try and sew on about half of it. I have a feeling the sun is going to become blinding pretty soon, or that my neck's going to start bugging me, and then I'll switch over to editing. But I would like to get as much of this done as I can this afternoon, and then maybe I can finish it up tonight. So here's what we're working with. This morning I got the lace trim sewn onto the center of the satin face chiffon ruffle. So now this part is pretty much finished. Eventually it will be sewn onto this piece, but I want to draft the pieces that will go right there before doing that. And I think it's also going to have a bow at the back somewhere, but again, I want to get everything draped first, and then I can figure it out in a little bit more detail. So far, I'm really happy with this. I still regret that I procrastinated for so long and it took me so long to finally get it together, but it's come together really nicely. The only thing I'm disappointed in is in the construction. I really kind of let myself down with this one, but other than that, I like it. I'm really excited to get this project finished. So I still don't love how it looks, but I think I managed to figure out something that will work. I cut the fabric out for this, oh gosh, I think in the first progress log, and unfortunately I don't have enough left to cut them out again, so I'm just working with what I have, and I think if I trim it with lace and add some bows, I can get it to a point I'm happy with, even if it isn't quite what I'd hoped it would be. So this is what I'm going to go with. I think I might gather them down today, and then I can sew them on and start sewing on the lace tomorrow. I also have to figure out how they attach. They continue around to the back, so I think it might be better if they attach to the train and then snap in place over top of this front panel. So that's the current plan, and I'll update you if I have anything more to share today. So this is what I'm currently working with, and I don't remember when I last filmed, but I think it was a couple days ago. For the last few days, I've been spending maybe an hour on this project and then going downstairs and just focusing on editing. But as of now, I've gotten 6 out of these 7 videos that I'm posting before Christmas up and edited. So I only have 1 left to go, and I've got all my blog posts done too, and my photos. So I should be able to focus a lot more on this, which is really exciting because I want to get it finished before the new year. So I think since I last filmed, I got the top edge of the panniers gathered, and I also added a pleat to the bottom edge, which gives it more of the shape I wanted, and then it's gathered at the center back too. And now I'm playing around a little bit with the lace appliques and how I want them to fall, as well as some bows. So as you can see, there are lace appliques right there, then there are lace appliques going down the back, and a bow right there. And I think that bow is going to cover a hook or snap that secures the panniers to this part of the skirt. At the back, you can see just more of me playing around with the lace, as well as a giant bow I made out of the jacquard fabric that I used for the front of the skirt, which I personally think adds a lot to it. And yeah, that's kind of what it looks like so far. So I'm going to sew some of the lace on today. I'm going to try and figure out the closures today and hopefully make some progress. I doubt that progress will really be visible since it's just sewing stuff that's already pinned in place, but hopefully I'll have something to show for it by the end of the day, and I'll try and keep you updated throughout the process. So I've made quite a bit of progress over the last 2 hours. I sewed snaps onto each side of the panniers so they'll clip onto the front panel, which I also sewed snaps onto. And then I covered these snaps with bows so you can't see the stitching that attaches them to the other side of the fabric. And I also sewed some of the lace appliques onto the underside of this, just to make it look a little bit more interesting. Over here I've sewn the lace panels onto the front, and hopefully once the panniers are on they will drape nicely, so you'll just see a little bit of the lace sticking out from the edges. It looks great! I'm so happy with that! I think it looks awesome, and now I'm really excited to move forward. So what else I have to do is gather down the top edges and then secure them to waistbands, and that's going to be the last thing I do because as soon as I do that it will no longer fit properly on my dress form, which will make it harder for me to document my progress. But I think that's what I'm going to have to do either tonight or tomorrow. But before doing that, I have to figure out whether or not I'm adding lace trim to this part. It's just pinned for now. I also have to figure out where the gathered portion is going to be sewn on to this part of the skirt. And I also have to figure out where the bottom part will be sewn on to this skirt. Because they will all be sewn together. There will just be 2 separate waistbands. One that secures at the back and one that secures at the front. Oh, and I also have to sew the bow on. But other than that, this is almost done, and I'm really happy with how it looks. I think I need to do a little bit more on the bodice to dress it up, maybe add some fake flowers and a bow. But for now I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go downstairs, I'm going to get some lunch, and I'm also going to order some notions to go with the materials I bought fabric for in the garment district. I have an Etsy cart full of pretty trims and I'm gonna pull the trigger on a couple of them. I just sewed my massive bow onto the back of the pannier portions of the skirt. And now I'm gonna sew what little lace I have left over onto the sides of the train of the skirt. I'm a little bit worried about trying to sew the lace on because I do not have very much lace left. I only bought a half yard of the lace that I've used for all of these appliques and for trim on the hem of the skirt. I'm down to having 2 appliques left and the edging on one side of the trim. So hopefully I can make it work and that will be enough to come up with something pretty. And yeah, I'm going to sew that on and then I'm going to put it all in my dress form and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So last night I got the lace onto the back of the dress and I also got the back of the dress tacked onto the base layer. So now all I have left to do is gather down the waistlines and attach waistbands. And I was hoping to do that in this video so you could see the whole project finished, but I'm not feeling that great today. I'm fairly confident I'll feel better tomorrow, but I just don't want to get into the corset and to do the final fitting that I really need to do before gathering everything down. So unfortunately it's just not going to get finished today. However, I think this is a really great representation of what it will look like finished. Actually, you know what? I'll pin the bodice onto the dress form. That will complete it even more. There we go. Now please keep in mind that the bodice is way too small for the dress form, so it doesn't have quite the silhouette it will when worn. Anyway, as I was saying, this is pretty much done aside from the waistbands, and once the waistbands are on, I won't be able to display it on my dress form because it will no longer fit. So I think this is a really good ending point, even though I'd hoped to end with it finished. And in the meantime, I'm going to work on something else. As much as I want to finish the 1880s project, I know it's going to get done before the end of the year, so I want to move on to a quick, fun project like something from the 1890s or a more casual 18th century costume. So I'm doodling designs for that and hopefully I can get started on one of these today. And though I'm working on this late 1890s ensemble, which is inspired by a fashion plate I can link down below, as well as one of the pictures in this book. I just thought it would be a fun little side project. It should be relatively simple but also provide quite a bit of hand sewing since all of those stripes are going to have to be sewn on by hand. And I'm going to use a few fabrics already in my collection. This isn't the best lighting for them, but I've got this wine colored velvet that I'm going to use for the stripes. And then I have this really pretty cream colored wool that I'm going to use as a base. And I actually think I'm going to line and stiffen the skirt with the remaining jacquard I have left over from the 1880s project, because I really can't picture using that on anything else again. My other plan is a simple early 18th century costume, and I think I'm going to combine a few of these skirted jacket patterns from Janet Arnold's Patterns of Fashion 1 and come up with something like that and then pair it with a matching skirt. I have this cotton flannel, which I got from Joann's from the Platitudes collection, that I think would suit something like this really nicely. And then I also have this purple knit and a purple wool that I got when I went to the garment district, and I think combined these can turn into something really cool. I also went to Michael's just because my mom was going to be in the area, so I decided to tag along, and I got some cording that I can use for the front of that. And I also got this really pretty ornament, but that isn't super relevant. So I've created the pattern for the top of the skirt, and it's actually underneath all of these books. So I'm going to cut that out and try and get it sewn together. And then after that's finished, I'm going to drape the lower portion, which is going to be created as a giant flounce, which kind of intimidates me to draft since it's basically going to be an uneven circle skirt that hangs to that type of shape. And I've never really done anything like that before, so I think it'll be a challenge. I also have to drape the bodice, and I would also like to scale up these patterns and transfer them to paper so I can start fitting that tomorrow. So lots of good stuff. Hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit tonight and make some progress, and then keep you guys updated throughout the next couple weeks on Instagram. So I got the jacquard layer of the skirt cut out and sewn together, and then I drafted the bottom flounce. It doesn't have quite the sleek shape I wanted it to have on top, but I'm going to play around with pinning the petticoat, and hopefully I can figure out something that's a little bit more dramatic. So I am going to go ahead and cut out the top portion from suiting, as well as transferring the bottom portion onto paper and then cutting that out from suiting as well. But I don't know if I'm going to get to that tonight. I think instead I might assemble a mock-up for the Janet Arnold pattern, which I did get transferred onto paper, and then I added seam allowances and everything. So now I can make a mock-up and make any necessary alterations before moving forward with this project. So that's my plan for the rest of the evening. I didn't make quite as much progress last night as I would have liked on the mock-up for the 18th century costume. So that's going to be my first order of business this morning. Ta-da! So I got the 18th century mock-up assembled. I made a mock-up for the sleeves too, but I think I'm gonna have to scrap them completely. They're way too long and wide, and the sleeve head needs to be way more sloped to fit properly on the arm. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna draft my own pattern or significantly alter the existing pattern before trying to sew them onto the mock-up. So that's something I'll do this evening. I haven't tried it on over my stays yet, but I did try it on and make some alterations that it clearly needed, like lifting the waistline and taking it in at the back slightly. It gaped away from the back of my shoulders, so I took the straps in quite a lot. And I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's going to work out really nicely. I love the flare of the skirt, and I'm excited to try it on over stays. The next task I was going to do was assembling the top layer for the turn of the century skirt, but I've realized that part of the issues I've been having with my sewing machine skipping stitches comes down to the bobbin thread I've been using. And last night I made 5 bobbins with that thread in preparation. So I'm going to have to strip all of those bobbins and remake them, and I'm just not feeling up for that right now. So I'm going to get some lunch and do that later in the day. And I think this is where I'm going to end the video and switch over to the wrap-up, because I want to upload this video today, which means I have to stop filming and start editing at some point. So that's the end of the footage. I'm actually really happy with what I accomplished over these past 2 weeks. I didn't really realize how much I got done until I was watching through the footage. I felt like I procrastinated a lot more than I actually did. I managed to plan and purchase materials for a bunch of future projects, which may not seem like a difficult thing to do, but it actually takes quite a lot of thought. So I was happy to get that done, and I'm excited about all of those projects. I'm also pretty pleased with how my Christmas costume turned out. And though I don't love it, I'm happy that I pushed through and finished the hat as well. But most of all, I'm thrilled that I worked so much on my 1880s dress. I think it's about 99% complete. I only have an hour or an hour and a half of work left to do to finish it, which is fantastic. I don't know if I left the clips in, but there were definitely points where I didn't feel like I was going to be able to finish it. It was just such a different silhouette for me to take on, and I felt so uncertain and unmotivated about it at points. So for it to come out so well, aside from a few little construction errors, I'm just really, really happy. And then at the very end of this video, I started work on 2 more projects, which I feel so good about. I haven't made very much progress on them so far, but I think just having multiple things in progress makes me feel so much more motivated and so much more excited to get to work. And that was something I really missed with my primary project being the 1880s dress. So I'm really excited for the next week and the new year, and I hope that you are too. I really appreciate all the support I've gotten on these videos, and I really hope you enjoyed watching them. In case you missed any, there will be a playlist link down below, as well as my other sites in case you want to follow me and see updates on some of the projects mentioned in this video. And of course, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Or if you don't celebrate Christmas, then I hope you have a lovely holiday. And if you don't celebrate anything at all, or you don't particularly enjoy this time of year, then I just hope you have the best possible week you can and an excellent start to the new year. Thank you again for watching, and I will talk to all of you very soon.